Hello and welcome to Bud Explains, where I take a subject, be that rules, history or concept from the role-playing world, and try to explain it to you in a way that I hope helps you understand how it works. Today's explanation is the machinations of the Migo and Delta Green, Part 2. Again, please note this is generally considered handler-only information, so watch at your own risk. In order to understand the workings of the Migo, it's first worth looking into what SSG-1 discovered when they partially translated the hieroglyphics on the inside of the crashed saucer at Roswell. It was noted that certain themes seemed to be prevalent, with the likes of a kind of stylised Egyptian ankh being used to symbolise eternity and afterlife, and there were symbols for the likes of animals and humans. Some phrases could be piecemeal translated to things like "we go hereafter above" and "the gods rests," though quite what they meant evaded the scientists, and it was determined to be a derivative Pidgin and not a complete language. In the year 1954, SSG-1 was renamed Project Dancer, and not much else was discovered by them for 30 years. SSG-2, who were led by Detlev Bronk, began the task of dismantling the saucer at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in the autumn of 1947, and it became known as the Bucket. The team working on it were meticulous in attempting to work out the purpose of each component and how it was to be correctly used before taking it apart, though this was slow going and it took years for them to do what seemed to be objectively easy things such as getting a door to open. The bucket itself was 30 foot in diameter, 12 foot tall and weighed only 12 pounds, meaning it could be easily moved by a single man as it hovered around 1.5 feet from the ground. Sound and lights implied that the power still functioned, and the hull was covered in a material akin to tin foil that was impenetrable and frictionless. Bronk even nuked a piece of the debris with a 10 megaton blast, and it was undamaged. The inside of the craft was cramped and unsuitable for humans, with the rooms being made of a substance like clay. Any part of it that was cracked or chipped away would regenerate perfectly, and it was later discovered to be a kind of mould. There were no comforts such as seats or beds, and the controls appeared to be geometric prints on a plate in the centre, later known as the kitchen. There was a dome above the kitchen that had 3 triangular windows that could be made transparent when using the console, and again these could not be damaged in any way. The gravity inside was accidentally discovered to be mostly like that of Earth, though the bucket could be turned upside down, and those inside could still stand firm, indicating 2 gravitational fields. A talented mathematician, Dr. Stephen Cortes, a member of SSG-2, became intrigued by the sigils within the craft, noting that occasionally they would glow or shift colour, seemingly based on the amount of people inside the craft and what they were doing. Over time, he managed to decipher how to manipulate the sigils and succeeded in starting the bucket's power source, though was unable to use it, though he remained confident that eventually this was something that he would work out. As time passed, he began working alone, becoming more withdrawn, and this behaviour was overlooked. He managed to pinpoint what was creating the gravitational effects, working out that there was a series of minute sigils made up of squares, triangles and circles on the ceiling that glowed softly. Over time, he deciphered a sequence that he believed would activate a kind of space warp, possibly through time itself, and 2 of his colleagues, Dr. Wexler and Dr. Malbayam, began believing that the ship was telepathically influencing him and nobody could duplicate his work. On the 12th of December 1949, having inscribed the sigil on a wooden overhang in his quarters, he was discovered appearing to have had the life crushed out of him by an unknown force. Upon further examination, the sigil formed a point that created a cone-shaped field of intense gravity 190 times stronger than that on Earth, and it was actually visible as a distortion in the air. It was noted that a plank of wood that was underneath the sigil, when removed, continued to exert gravitational force in the direction that the sigil was pointing. SSG-2 concluded that it was caused by a false bend in space-time by some matter or energy that defied detection. The sigil had a range that could destroy a radio sonde 24 kilometres above ground, and 8 people were accidentally killed by the plank being mishandled, and to this day it remains locked away in Majestic's S4 laboratory. Doctors Wexler and Malbayam were tasked with continuing the work of Cortes, with the idea that the 2 of them would afford a degree of safety to their work, though their work to replicate Cortes' sigil drawing drew a blank, and at some point Malbayam had a frenzied fit and started destroying Cortes' notes. Wexler tried to intervene and Malbayam attacked him, meaning Wexler was forced to shoot and kill him to survive. During the 1950s, there were other outbreaks of insanity, and SSG-2 was renamed Project Red Light. Around the turn of 1960, the secrets of the bucket had killed or driven mad many of the sharpest minds the country had available. The scientists began working under armed guard, and many of them were given the offer to disappear from society and permanently live at the facility. Red Light became more paranoid and the body count continued to rise. Over the following years, nothing more was learned, and nobody but Cortes had gained any insight into the workings of the bucket. Moving forward, Majestic briefed President Eisenhower on the 14th of July 1954 about the first big break by Project Aquarius, an NSA project that continues to this day. The NSA had been listening to electronic eavesdropping stations and had, for a while, been hearing an odd noise. They posited that these were pieces of intelligent communications coming from deep space. None of them could be understood, and the consensus was that they were coming from the moon to sites on Earth. After the assassination of President Kennedy in 1963, Majestic briefed President Johnson on their existence, though the inner circle of the group decided that they would not reveal themselves to any new presidents until they had anything new to report with regard to the bucket, the dead greys, the communication with the survivor, or the signals from deep space. Kennedy had been in favour of Majestic's work and had suggested a moon mission to find the extraterrestrial base that was suspected to exist on the dark side of the moon. Majestic had had concerns that a new president might decide to tell the public, thus creating a worldwide panic. In 1972, the bucket was destroyed by continual attempts to restart it, killing 4 personnel. Majestic decided not to tell President Nixon due to concerns that he would use the knowledge of the Eves and the bucket to distract the public from the Watergate scandal. The next significant development came in 1978 when an NSA cryptographer worked out part of what the deep space transmission that had been detected in 1954 said. It turned out that it was a message from the Ebes saying that they wanted to finally make contact as the people of Earth had become advanced enough to warrant communication. The response from humanity was to be a coded laser pulse pointing at a specific moon coordinate using specific frequencies of light. This eventually led to a meeting in 1980 with Majestic and the Ebes at Area 51. A ground crew had been prepared for a flying saucer, however the Greys materialised into the room, causing 3 shots to be fired by guards that were spooked by the surprise. NRO agent Adolf Lepus pulled his gun and killed both guards that had fired shots, though either way, the Ebes seemed unfazed. The lone Ebe survivor that had not spoken in 33 years finally broke its silence and said, "Thank you," and rejoined its companions. At this meeting, an accord was reached. The Greys told Majestic that they needed human genetic material and they also needed the US government to cover up their actions, an agreement of mutual support and protection. In return, they would provide the US government with knowledge that would benefit them. They provided something that came to be known as the Cookbook, a large 3,500-page book that held valuable information on the genetics of humanity, a major revelation and a challenge due to its bewildering array of formulae and illustrations. Over the next 15 years, Majestic scientists were still coming to terms with the information they had, and only in 1990 did practical experimentation begin. In addition to the cookbook, the Greys offered something that left Majestic stunned. A periodic document that gave a complete breakdown of the military forces of the entire Earth in astounding detail, including the likes of every nuclear warhead to even lone gunmen camped off-grid. They promised to update the document on a bi-monthly basis, and it became known as The Report, and was the key to them winning the Cold War in the late 1980s. What they desired in return was freedom to operate within the US, harvesting citizens on a temporary basis with the promise that no lasting harm would be done. They had permission to conduct experiments of a biological and psychological nature and fly over US airspace without interception. With a decision this big, they decided it was too much to do alone and went ahead and brought the president into the conspiracy. This happened to be President Reagan. Reagan once claimed to have seen a UFO in 1974, so getting him to buy into the idea of contact with an alien intelligence was not difficult. The Greys agreed that they would meet Majestic again in January 1981. Reagan instructed Majestic to finalise the accord and everything was settled, though negotiations were almost stopped due to an investigation of Majestic by the Office of Naval Intelligence, though exposure was not their agenda. They wanted to share the technology, and as such they were brought into the conspiracy and they kept quiet. As time passed, the Greys were not sticking to their side of the deal, as humans that they were experimenting on were getting injured, killed, or just plain disappearing. Cattle mutilations and the like started happening, and this went beyond what Majestic had agreed to. 1984 rolled around, and Majestic contacted the Greys in a polite manner to request a meeting to talk about the current situation. The Greys offered nothing in the way of explanation and simply stated that the government would continue helping them, as had been agreed. Majestic grudgingly went along with it, as they knew that their craft were impervious to anything they could throw at them, so there was little point in conflict. Additionally, though many US citizens had died as a result of the accord, the military gains had caused Russia to back away, something that they put down to advanced spy satellites and spies within their government. The New World Order was here, with America at the top due to the help of the Greys. George Bush Sr. became president in 1988, and having already been informed on Majestic from his time with the CIA, he continued to follow Reagan's policies. The Greys provided technology on sonic weapons that were tested in the Gulf War, and examples of genetic manipulation were shown as humanity delved into the cookbook. Following Bush Sr. losing out to President Clinton in 1992, Majestic again decided not to inform the president unless there was a development, and still, who and what the Greys are remained a mystery to them. They're completely oblivious to one simple truth: the Greys are not real. They are biological puppets controlled by the Migo to act as a front to encourage humanity to help them. The single Eve that lay dormant for 33 years was there to spy on Majestic. The Migo staged many events over the years, dropping space debris and the like, and was surprised how efficient the hairless monkeys collected and hid it from the rest of humanity. Each incident was a test by the Migo on whether the US government was capable and willing to hide their activities. The disappearances, cattle mutilations, abductions and the like, these were all tests to see what value the US government placed on those it was meant to serve. The knowledge on decoding the transmission in 1978 was broadcast to the person who decoded it. They never figured it out for themselves. The story of the Greys being peaceful explorers, desperate to save their species from extinction, was carefully crafted, and overstepping the bounds of the Accord was a test to see how much resistance Majestic would put up, and the Migo still believed that Majestic will cover up their activities as they exploit and abduct its citizens. The Migo's interest, as explained in the previous video in this series, is in humanity's brain. It is epistemically diploid, i.e. it has two aspects, rational and irrational. The irrational side is what allows them to make leaps of faith and defy logical calculation, and the Migo simply cannot do this. They are unable to think in an intuitive manner. The best way of describing this is that they are incredibly binary in their thinking. They know or experience something, or they just don't know it at all, and if they don't, it simply doesn't exist for them. The Migo find the human ability to be correct with their rational logical jumps to be something they fear. The likes of going from simple radios to nuclear weapons in a relatively short period of time is impressive to the Migo. The experiments that the Greys performed on abductees are strange and alien stimuli which are monitored. Some of them have their memory of such experiments suppressed, and as such they experience the phenomena known as lost time. Some abductees are taken to Yugoth for further terrible experimentation. Additionally, the Migo understand that the stars are almost right and the destruction of humanity is close, and this is something they actively hide from them, as if Majestic or even humanity ever learned of this, then who knows what they would do. Following the coup that brought Delta Green into Majestic in 2001, the subject of another video entirely, Director Smith informed the Greys that the Accord would be renegotiated. Much of the Majestic Steering Committee was convinced that this was a death sentence for humanity, so the Greys answered with nothing but silence. All Greys that were present in labs created for joint use collapsed like puppets that had had their strings cut, and all technology that was given to Majestic by the Greys simply stopped working, with only technology created using human science continuing to operate. Everything else simply switched off and could not be switched on again. Majestic had used this gifted technology and intelligence to curry favour and cooperation with the powers that be, and it dawned on them that if they had nothing to offer, support may be withdrawn. While all this had been happening, over the years, groups like Saucer Watch and Phenomenon X had, the whole time, been conducting interviews with abductees, former Majestic scientists and officers, and what they had discovered gave hints at the truth that lay beyond the Greys. Though their operations on Earth had ceased, it remains unknown as to whether they had accomplished their goal of unlocking intuition in all Migo, though their silence could simply be the calm before the storm. If you found this video useful, don't forget to like and share it, and make sure to subscribe for more Bud Explains videos in the future. Bud out.